Hi, I'm Marcus, and I've been in the Utaite community for a few years now, and I've ended up mixing around 80 songs throughout my time here. And overall, my experience has been great. I think mixing is a really powerful tool and one of the most necessary for a cover. So if you're new to the community and you're thinking about picking up one of the staff roles, I suggest animation just because nobody really knows how to do it, and you can just manipulate people into mixing or drawing for you for free if you offer them a really simple audio spectrum video. But if you really do want to learn how to mix, I'll show you how I personally do my mixes and hopefully you'll realize why you don't. Just a disclaimer that I don't really know what I'm doing. This has been a hobby of mine and there are a bunch of professionals in this community that can probably give you real advice. And you shouldn't really listen to me because I've just been winging it the entire time. Now that that's out of the way, the first step in getting a good mix is finding a good vocalist. I really can't stress how important this is because essentially all a mix does is amplify a vocal. And if the vocals are bad, the bad will be amplified. For example, I used to think I was bad at mixing when I was mixing my own vocals. But then I started working for Shishishiena. So moving on, the first actual step in the mixing process would be tuning vocals or pitch correction. A lot of people have differing opinions on how heavily a vocalist should rely on tuning. In my opinion, I say the harder the better because there is a reason why Lil Nas X is famous and you're not. You'll start to realize just how important finding a good vocalist is around this point in the mix. Mixing is a lot like group projects. The better your group mates are, the more time you can spend on Twitter. After tuning, many people would say the next step would be to time vocals, and this is where I differ and probably where you should stop watching this video. I personally do all the effects for the mix before I time, because some effects might mess up the vocal timings and they'll sound out of place if the vocals are timed without effects. And also, I'm lazy. Here's a breakdown on how I do all of my effects. First, I do compression. Some people say that you should do EQ before compression. I don't. Compression basically evens out all the volume so that the vocals are more consistent. I've heard that generally you're not supposed to compress more than 6 decibels, but I've found that you can't go wrong with more compression. I don't really know how to use compression plugins correctly, so I do this part in the actual waveform, like editor, so I can see what's happening visually to my track. I have no real formula for doing this either, but these are my settings, and I kind of just go at it again and again until it turns into a brick. You might want to do less of these compressions if the instrumental is acoustic or if it sounds emptier than like a regular pop song. Next, I go back into the multi-track editor and start on EQ, or equalization. Nobody calls it equalization. What EQ does is it subtracts or amplifies certain frequencies from your vocal so that it doesn't sound like your vocal was recorded on the iPhone voice memos app. This part of mixing is actually really hard, and if you're just starting out, it can be difficult to know what frequencies you should be listening for. So if you're struggling, I'd suggest that you just give up. Once again, we're going back to the point I made about finding a good vocalist. Miss Fiverr Queen Shishishiena has a really expensive mic, and she even has a little cage for recording, so just in case a family brawl breaks out during a session, the yelling doesn't get picked up by the mic. Because of all that, I barely have to do any EQ because there's nothing really wrong with her recording. There is one more necessary step before the actual effects, and that's Ozone Imager. I got this plugin for free when Ozone was having a promotional event, and it basically won me all of my CB Mix scores. If you aren't willing to pay for the plugin, you can probably pirate it, and it'd still be worth all the viruses that might come with it. All I do is click the Stereorize button, crank it up to the max, and I have the width around 25 for main vocals and 60 for harmonies. After all this, you can move on to all the other effects like reverb. Sometimes you might use echo, but more often than not, I don't because it doesn't fit the song. I also don't know how to use delays, so maybe that's why I've never won a CB, but I've been using the same reverb preset for 2 years and I'm not really getting complaints, so who's really winning? Reverb and echo are really dependent on the type of song that's being mixed, but as a general rule, I'd say more for ballady songs and less for upbeat songs. Yay, yay, yay! Now you're all done. But you're not, because you put off timing last. You don't have to do any mental gymnastics figuring out how to time your vocals, but you may have to do some mental gymnastics trying to rationalize why you volunteered to spend 10 hours timing vocals for that 6-person chorus. This step is pretty mechanical and straightforward. Cut up each syllable of your vocal, line it up with the peaks of the music, and listen back to see if it sounds good and adjust from there. Pretty easy, right? Right, it is easy, and if you're giving me off-time vocals, you're probably just bad. It's literally not even a skill you have to develop. You literally just have to listen. Like, how are you gonna be in a singing community and not be able to tell if you're off-time? You can literally use a metronome too, like what's not clicking, because the metronome is, and especially if there's more than one vocalist, you can so easily tell when they're not lining up. Like, what is so hard? Just press the play button, god. Just kidding. Sometimes timing vocals for long hours can mess with how you perceive hearing the music, which brings me into my final point. If you're really struggling with a mix, whether that be for a commission, chorus battle, collab, or cover, my number one tip is just make people do it for you.